Welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. We appreciate you listening in and learning with us. The stories and leadership tips you hear will help you become a great leader. Listen intentionally. Now, to our host, Sean Olson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast. This is the podcast where you hear the stories of real people just like you who have become extraordinary leaders. You'll learn valuable tips from their lives that you can implement to become the best leader that you were created to be. When leaders are intentional, lives are changed. I'm Sean Olson, your host. I am an author. I'm an executive coach and business owner, and happy to be with you all today. And listeners, we're in for a treat today as my guest is Marcus Higgs. Marcus is a communication coach for parents of preteens, a huge issue and need, but a niche you don't oftentimes hear about. And Marcus is coming to us from today from the Bahamas. He lives down in Nassau, and I'm sure it is sweltering hot down there in the summer in Nassau. Marcus Higgs, it is awesome to have you on the Intentional Leader Podcast. Welcome.
Sean, it's wonderful to be here. From our pre-conversations and everything else, I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, it is hot here in the Bahamas. Yeah,
I have no doubt. So if we come down there, we have a personal tour guide now, right?
there you go. There you go.
Exactly. Listeners, I hope you hit that subscribe button so you can get notified of every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast and catch incredible guests just like Marcus. Hey, Marcus, we met recently and we had a great conversation. I am a parent. My wife and I have one child. She's now past that preteen stage, but that stage was so crucial. And so I really appreciate this because I'm a firm believer that the key to family success and the key to children really moving forward is that parental involvement and really diving in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the most influential part of their life. Yeah. There's this line from this guy named Kenneth Burke. He said, "There's no persuasion without identification." And the first place a person identifies with the world is in their parent. And I shared that with a parent one time, and she said, Marcus, and as a parent, you see yourself in your kid. And a lot of my work has to deal with identity. It was to answer the mental health issue that's happening, and it comes down to identity. And that's why it's so powerful, the work that I do.
Fantastic. And I look forward to the deep dive into that. But we're going to start out, Marcus, with the same question we always ask. We ask our guests just to kind of walk us through their professional history, but more importantly, the leadership lessons learned along the way. So tell us about you and your journey in the Bahamas.
Well, my journey started in California, Riverside, Southern California. That's where I was born. And my journey started a little bit earlier in that my mother's from the Philippines and my father's from the Bahamas.
Okay.
They met in Nebraska, of all places.
What were they doing in Nebraska?
They were going to university, Union College.
Yeah.
And everybody had gone off for, I believe it was Thanksgiving break, and they were both left there.
Yeah.
And they met and then when a man loves a woman.
Exactly.
Many years later.
That's a great story.
Hey. So I grew up in California until 7. Let's just fast forward. When I was 12, I moved to the Bahamas. Eventually went back to Alabama to study communication.
Okay.
After getting my degree in journalism, moved to South Korea to be a missionary, actually.
Wow.
And while being a missionary there, I say my understanding of the divine, of religion and spirituality grew. No animosity towards the church, but I just didn't want to preach what I didn't necessarily believe, or coming into a new understanding. And I've always had a sincere relationship with the divine since a young age, sincere prayer life and so on. And then I went out to Saudi Arabia, learned about Islam as a world religion, came back, taught in Thailand, taught in Spain.
You're a world traveler.
Yes, I am. That, and again, all of this feeds into the work I do now. because what the work I do now, and we'll get to it, it's
Yeah.
about being human. It's about being human and human development. Yeah, Spain, Thailand. Now I am back in the Bahamas with my aged parents. So with the skills that I have, I do coaching whilst in an area that I think is highly needed. I also taught I was an English high school teacher for that time. That's how I was traveling about.
Very good.
And to be a leader, as it relates to being leadership, while I was in Korea, I was in administration. I was also the coordinator of institutes there, and being a teacher, you are a leader. You set the tone, you set the expectation, and then something we're going to touch on. But as a parent and as an educator, I believe we create the context for learning to take place, or we create the context for the person to have a full expression.
Mm-hmm.
As a leader, you set the vision, then your team and operators, they align with that vision, and then you let them express themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They may not be in the right roles, you may have to shift roles, but you set the vision, and then it's just like, hey guys, let's get there together. That's what I've learned along the way. I've also learned people have different values being in all those different cultures. And what values are is what's important to you.
Right.
For some people, it's finance. For some people, it's family. Other people, it's their faith. But when you know what's important for that team member,
Mm-hmm.
then we can align our conversations and still hold the goal in mind. But
Yeah.
now I know what your values are. And
I
one more
love
thing
that.
that I learned as a leader is, yeah, there will be ruptures. There will be bumps and bruises along the way. What we say in communication is there will always be conflict. Conflict doesn't define the
Mm.
relationship. How we manage the conflict does. And if you care about the relationship, we will rupture the repairs and we will set our identity to go forward again.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, I think people take conflict typically in a very negative connotation. Conflict just means we're not totally on the same page. We think of things differently, we look at life differently, which actually makes life robust and beautiful if we
Yes.
don't make it a negative aspect, right? It's just sharing those thoughts and those ideas. So I want to hit something on your story though, because you bounced around the globe in many ways. And I
Mm-hmm.
can tell that you're a very cerebral person. You've been learning and observing and taking things in. What can our listeners intentionally do to take advantage of those opportunities, right? Because we travel different places, be it vacation, or even talking to somebody virtually through Zoom, through work and such as
Yeah.
that. You obviously were very intentional at trying to observe and take in and learn. How can our listeners be more intentional like that?
Two things come to mind with that question. One is I was in a classroom capacity, or the context was actually for me to sit down and listen to the learner.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit different from vacation.
Sure.
However, while I was vacationing, one thing that I do take as a communicator is sitting down and listening, being intentional with listening. We call it active listening, but in relationships, it's letting the person hold their dignity because you will meet people that you do not agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it ABC. It's called accepting their beliefs, not agreeing with it, but accepting it, building upon it. So you're actually showing them, oh, yeah, I see and I understand how you can see it like this. And then you challenge with curiosity. So it's
Mm,
not directly attacking the person because we don't need to attack anybody else, I feel.
exactly. Yeah.
But when you ask with curiosity, you're leaving them with the question. And you're, again, in all of those instances, you're seeking understanding
Mm-hmm.
rather than to be understood. And if you're a confident, secure person, it's just like, yeah, I know what I believe. And if you want to explore it, we can. But I am interested in you at the moment. And that's where you're
Exactly.
intentionally being interested in the person, which
Yeah.
interestingly makes you more interesting.
Exactly. No, those are just great leadership tips. I love ABCs, right? I like things that are very simple. And so I love the ABC there. But listeners, what I want you to catch on this is the essence of leadership, right? And I've said
Hey,
this numerous times, leadership is a privilege. It is not a right. It is a privilege to be able to tap into someone, to truly understand them. And what I like about how you're sharing that, Marcus, especially the curiosity side,
mhm.
people actually love to talk about themselves and
Yeah,
share. They're just
yeah,
never given the opportunity. because a lot of us have these headphones on that we're listening for what we don't like instead of just
Yeah.
listening to understand. And that was the phrase you used. And it's the key phrase for all of us as leaders. We have to listen to understand. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's pick up the journey as you became a coach, communication coach for parents of preteens. What helped you kind of like zero in on that niche of life?
Yeah. Sustained inquiry. That's an approach to learning. It's called project-based learning, which I think all life is project-based, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
what are you working on? I asked the question, the original question was, how can I teach my ninth graders to tell the greatest story ever told? Greatest story
Wow.
ever told is, yeah, right. It's where you understand you're the protagonist, you are the audience, and you're the author of it. So it's like, how do you live a good life? That's the question of the
Mm-hmm.
philosophers. In that, I noticed the rising issue of mental health challenges inside the English-speaking world, interestingly. Um, and I was trying to answer that, like, how can I serve parents to answer this issue that's happening with mental health, right? And taking my communication. I've been through many iterations of this. So to your question, yeah, I've refined this a few times.
Sure.
I have a communication background. Um, I do love coaching, philosophy and living a good life and so on. Coaching, I want to help parents. So I'm still a teacher in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
but in a different capacity with a different audience. And working with children, I've done that for my majority of my life. But instead of working with kids one to one, I wanted to leverage it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's with parents. Now, why preteens? Because this is that transition phase from dependent to independent. And it's
Mm.
in our transitions that we get to learn our life lessons. You have, I believe you are more wise than me. You have a lot more wisdom
No.
than me.
No, I just
Down
have
here.
less hair than you. That's about it, Marcus. I've burnt everything off the top, and you got this big, beautiful hair. So I love
But
all that, though, because I like that you're focusing on the parent side of it, right? Because you've been there
yeah.
for the kids.
Hmm.
And I have no doubt you're still impacting children and preteens. But parents are the ones that make the difference.
Mr. Rogers said, if you want to help the kids, support the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, parents are the ones who make the difference. And when I was inside parent teacher conversations,
Yeah.
while I was talking with a parent, it was, again, no shaming, no blaming, no complaining, and no judgment towards a parent. But when you communicate with a person, it made sense of, oh, okay, I see why your kid is showing up like this. There are these things that if we were coaching, if I could sit with you in your communication, that could change fundamentally of how your kid approaches life. And when I made those connections inside the parent teacher meetings, I was just like, okay, yeah, no, this is a unique space that I can fill.
I love that. I love that. So I know that you have created a model that is called Show Up to help
Yeah.
parents through this. So give us a quick walkthrough Show Up and just what those different elements mean.
Sure. Thank you. So show up. S start with a strong identity.
Mm.
Every action comes from an identity. James Clear, Atomic Habits, and so on. And that does actually mean something specific. It means your virtues and your values. Your virtues are your 24 characteristic traits that are found in all cultures, all faith beliefs, all communities. This comes from positive psychology.
Hmm.
Um, it's accessible language that you can talk with kids. When I was a mentor, I would always see these virtues in kids, and you speak to that to bring their awareness to it, right? Um, and in a very simple way, it just means what's inside you that is acting towards a well-being of the community or acting towards a well-being of yourself. Leadership is one of them,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, and there are five that are expressed mostly. Uh, Everybody has all 24, but there are
Yeah.
five that you express most. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's virtues, and then values is again what's important to you. And as I speak to you in virtues and values, I'm speaking to your identity. So it's highly relevant to you. So it all starts with a strong identity. Second thing is Hold space for collaboration. We're still there?
Yeah, we're still here. We're
All
good.
right. All right. Hold space for collaboration and critical thinking. When kids are going through this transition phase, they often think, what's wrong with me? Instead of saying what's wrong with me, it's just like, hey, no, life is life in. This is a problem or a challenge. Let's solve it together. And it's autonomy supportive parenting. If you want to look it up, it's an approach to parenting where, again, you're giving them autonomy because they're moving into independence, but you're supporting them along the way. So it's how do you give that support while still letting them do what they do? O is opening up communication, different frameworks and strategies, because they will start to close off. But it's how do you open up that communication between you and the parent and within themselves so that they be mindful of the voice with which you speak to children, for in time that becomes a voice with which they speak to themselves.
Yeah. Let's sit on this piece for a second. I just have a follow-up question on this opening up or letting them open up. As they get to the teens, you said they begin to have that autonomy and they kind of, in some senses, maybe shut mom and dad out, right?
Yeah.
They're at that stage where they don't want to hear it. They think they know the better way. But it's like a lot of parents are like, okay, I do want to do this. I want to be active with my child. And I want to have that conversation, how was your day at school? And maybe what was the feelings around that? And it seems like a lot of times they just get these brick walls. What have you seen as like some key tips for parents to allow that child to open up when they just haven't been doing that?
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful question. Beautiful question. The reason I do my work in the preteen phase is so that you can establish that trust throughout this period of adolescence, right? So we're laying some groundwork in what I do. Now, if you're already in the throes of it, yeah, I get it. Let me speak it to you in a metaphor. Let's say you have a house and you invite somebody over, and every time they come over, they flip over your sofa, they leave marks on the wall, and they just dirty the place, right? They come in judgmental, let's say.
Yeah.
Then let's say there's another person. Every time they come, they help you rearrange stuff, maybe even leave a plate of food. They have a sweet scent or smell. Yeah. The house is like your teenager's mind. And when they invite you in there to have a conversation with them, how are you leaving it? And if you're always leaving it in disarray, I'm not going to invite you over anymore. That's just the truth of it. Now, here's the thing, right? Kids are going through their own dysregulation, their own jumbled up thought. Like, that's what it is at this stage, in this growth stage. If we have the right tools and skills to support them to go in there to actually help them make sense of it, as J.J. Abrahams used to say, a trusted advisor. If you're a trusted advisor, then I'm going to invite you over more often. Or when you do come over, I'm not going to shut you out necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that part about the trusted advisor because in the coaching that we do, that's the role we want to play, right? With our clients. We want to be that trusted advisor. They have full faith and confidence and confidentiality and they can share. What I like about that though is what I'm not hearing you say is telling them what to do, telling them what to think. It's not the tell. It's that curiosity and keeping that curiosity. Because I think that's where we fail a lot is we want them to do or be what we want them to be instead of allowing them to figure it out.
And that's where the tension arises, which I understand, and what that tension is as parents, we feel we're going to be judged by how our child shows up in the world. So then we want to force on them our virtue, our values. You know what I mean? That just might not be important to your kid right now, which is why you're getting pushback. But it's how do you manage that pushback? Life happens in the difficult conversations. And I just want to communicate this. I know it's not easy having been a kid and having worked with teenagers. I know it's not easy per se.
Yep.
Or rather, I know it's effortful. If it's easy or difficult depends on my attitude, but I know it's effortful. Yeah.
Yep. I love that. Yeah. It's that aspect that our kids are one of the greatest gifts we ever get in life, right?
Yeah.
the opportunity to really rear someone and develop them and to help them become strong and independent and thinking for themselves. And it shouldn't be easy, right? And even in leadership, I say in leadership, everything sounds simple, but it's not easy. In parenting, it sounds simple, but it's not easy. You're describing this, and people can go and they can look at your website and show up, and they're like, okay, I've got a model now. It's going to be easy to go. It's an easy model to follow. The work isn't
Right.
easy. And so,
Sure.
yeah, I love that though. And I just like that aspect though of like not forcing stuff on them. We
Mm.
have to teach them our values, let them see our values being lived out and what we think is important, but they've got to navigate that for themselves.
Yeah, I hear you saying not forcing it on them, and I totally agree. And they have to figure it out for themselves. There will be forcing functions, let's call it, and
Sure.
that's what independence is, and pushing them to be more independent. Gabor Mate wrote a book. He said, "Keep your child close when you're nurturing them, definitely, to make sure they're seen, safe, secure, and so on." And then that I call it paternal energy, because fathers often do this. They push them away, which is needed. And when I say push them away, to say you're safe, you're seen, you're supported from afar. You can still come back when you're
Mm-hmm.
ready, but I need you to try this on your own. And that forcing function of pushing them away, that creates tension.
Mm-hmm.
And that tension creates a holistic person, because we're not striving for a tensionless state. Is what Viktor Frankl said. We need that tension to help us grow.
Yep.
So we're not forcing our values on them, but we are, in a sense, forcing something to come up, to emerge, to come out. Yeah.
Force. Yeah, I like that. I'm not going to go any further with that. That's the SHO. Pick up with the W.
Hey, you're keeping notes. There we go. Beautiful, Sean. Yeah. The W is wonder and explore this world together.
Uh,
Um, it's it's project-based learning again. It's having a
mhm.
project that you're working towards bringing your virtues and values for a long period. If you read Angela Duckworth's Grit, her family, each individual commits to something that's self-directed, self-determination theory, that they want to master, that they can't say I quit easily at. So for you, it might be this podcast. For your child, it
Mhm.
may be learning a language or learning a sport or a hobby or something. And it gives you a place to talk about development and what development looks like, right?
Okay. Go a little deeper on that. So, what
Hmm.
I'm hearing you say is just say we have a child that wants to learn a foreign language, like you just described. So they want to learn
Okay.
French. What is our part of helping them navigate that project base? What's that look like in reality, like over the course of 6 months?
Sure. So we know what a win looks like.
Hmm.
And when I say we know what a win looks like, you're going to explore this with curiosity with your kid of, hey, what do you want this to be at the end? Do you want it to be you presenting a video on YouTube as in French or something? Or,
Mm-hmm.
do you want to, we can talk about it to get creative, but then we're going to say, okay, in project-based learning, you say, what do you have to learn in order to have this outcome?
Hmm.
And what we're trying to do is we're letting them be curious on how to navigate this while we're the guide on the side. Um, After they're figuring out stuff, they're going to try and they're going to fail.
Hmm.
And in that failure, it's just like, okay, what did we learn? And now you're teaching them how to make an effort in failure going forward. So what you're trying to do is you're teaching them how to stick with a project. And then
Exactly.
if you make milestones along the way, then check it off, and then we look at it at the end, and then we give feedback, just feedback along the way.
Yep. That is truly project based. So, listeners, I know a lot of you are in your jobs and you have these projects on a regular basis. These principles apply in those realms too, in the sense
Yeah.
of what is that destination we're going after, the desired outcome. Then we backtrack what are the steps we need to get there, maybe even those benchmarks or milestones. But I really appreciate, Marcus, you're throwing in there the aspect of the failures or mistakes and expecting those to happen. It's going to happen. And the phrase we always use is making a mistake is fine. If you learn from it, it stays a mistake. If you don't
Yeah.
learn from it, it becomes a failure. We got to learn from those
Mm,
mistakes. We have to expect them. And
yeah.
I think as leaders, I think as parents, one of the areas we make error the most, is we don't want any mistakes.
Hey.
But that's not reality, and that's not where we grow.
Yeah. So you have to be in that stretch zone, and being in that stretch zone of, like, let's say 80 to 90% effort, you will fail. You will fall short of your expectation. Let's use that. And it's okay to make mistakes. Just don't make them habits, because you'll notice a pattern of, I made a mistake. Would you learn from it? You do it 2 times, you do it 3 times, you do it 4 times. Be careful. Yeah.
Very good. SSHOW. What's the up?
The up is unveil your potential. Celebrate. Again, this is from BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits, but we don't celebrate enough. That's why in our head we have notes of our failures and we get on ourselves. But then the opposite of that is when you're going through life, if you celebrate, you're gathering together to honor. That's what the word celebrate means. Of you being yourself, of, again, your identity, of your virtues and values. You are doing a great job leading this podcast. And I just want to applaud that. And I'm affirming your leadership, your humor, and your hosting skills. And me celebrating this now, it felt good for me. It felt good for you. And then just sprinkling that intentional celebration along the way.
Absolutely. Most of us forget to celebrate. Yeah. Life is so overwhelming, and especially celebrating our children and developing that. And the phrase we use with leaders all the time is, what gets rewarded gets repeated.
Yes.
And so when you see those small glimpses from your child where they made this mistake last time and now this time they didn't, and they were able to take a step forward, we look at that and we're like, we feel great inside, kind of like, hey, they learned. But we need to tell them, that's awesome. Last time you did this. Look at what you did this time. And we forget.
And even just to extend that just a little bit more. So the full expression of it. I love that.
Yeah.
Let me just acknowledge that. I love it when a parent expresses this in earshot of the kid to somebody else. A public declaration of, hey, my kid did this. And it's not it's not gloating or prideful to say, but maybe it is, but it's like, I feel good that my kid did something awesome, and they're in earshot of it. Your kid is just like, oh yeah, that is like me. Oh yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the model. I want to dive into something really quick. I wasn't thinking about this before now, but I love the show up model. I love where it can take parents on that journey with their children to help them become the best version of themselves. That's what we do in our coaching, right? We're working with adults, not kids. Yeah. The preteens, it's such an influential time. The identity piece that you hit on at the very beginning. What do we do, or how do we handle all of the influence outside of our house? Be it at school, be it from teachers, be it from coaches, and whether it be in band or athletics, whatever realm, the mathletics, the academic side, there's so many forces / influences. And honestly, a lot of people with good intent, but maybe don't have the same values we have. And honestly, there's some people that don't have positive intent, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Talk to us. What do you do with those parents who are like, okay, these preteen years are so important. I can do my part. What about the rest of it? All those other influences that may be negative.
Beautiful question. Beautiful question. I'm going to divide it into 2 parts. The first part is, to teach is to learn twice. And what I mean by that is, I work with the parent one-to-one. And really what we're doing is we're exploring who the parent is, their identity, how they manage things and their emotions. My fundamental belief, all of this thing of parenting and interacting with others is so that we might understand ourselves. Know thyself and you'll understand the secrets of gods and men. You eventually, this is hard as a parent, as a teacher, that your learner is going to do a remix of your interaction with them, but you can't control them. You can but only influence them. Influence them as strongly as you can to prepare them for what will come, but it's out of your control. You pull the arrow, you shoot it, and this is from Khalil Gibran, the prophet. He says, "Where the arrow goes, after we've pulled it, we've done our part."
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not to get too personal, but you
Yeah.
spoke of your daughter and how you went through her age,
Mm-hmm.
and but there is a point as a father where it's just like, oh yeah, I have to let go.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's had to be very intentional. Like I've had to like intentionally hold back, not say things, let her
Yeah.
figure it out. I had some benefit in the sense of as I was growing in my career as a coach and learning that
Mm-hmm.
curiosity side and asking good questions, it became
Mm-hmm.
more natural for me to be like, hey, Sid, instead of statements, and this is what I say about coaching, coaching that simplistically is turning every statement into a question. So instead of making
Mm.
a statement to her, I'd be like, okay, what's that question? What's that curious question? And try to pull it out of her. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard.
It is hard. And you know what? And this is life. I
Mm-hmm.
think a phrase that I say is everything that eventually grows must first break. Um, that's how muscles grow. That's how an egg hatches. The question is, does it break from the outside or break from the inside?
Mm.
One, there's death, and the other, there's life that emerges. And it's trusting the kid that there is wisdom in there, and we have to create the context for that wisdom to express itself. Yeah. And even when we say that there are bad actors around or there's bad influences, because let me just pause here. This particular generation does have an added element of in studying the mental health issues
Yeah.
in the book The Anxious Generation, that continues the
Yes,
conversation. But this generation does have a unique challenge of social media. Yeah.
they do.
Um, my point being, sorry, there will be things that will pull them off track, and in that pulling, they're going to figure out who they are more. One last thing, I'll end with the Rumi quote. It says, "If we push away everything that rubs us the wrong way, however will we shine?" It's a
Mm-hmm.
paraphrase, but yeah. But
Yeah.
we are supposed to have those challenges, those buffers. But our job is to prepare them and then to understand ourselves who we are.
I love that. So for our listeners that are parents and they're saying, man, I want more of Marcus, what are you actually doing now professionally as
Yeah,
a communication coach for parents of preteens? Like the actual work you're doing that they may be able to tap into?
sure. I have some workshops I'm publishing on my site. Yeah. MarcusHiggs.com. I've I'm going to show up on LinkedIn with
Mm-hmm.
some lessons and some of these same tips and ideas. Get the conversation rolling there. I do have the show up framework, which I'm rolling out in August for my beta to get some case studies.
Fantastic.
This is the same work that I did in the classroom, but I need some case studies with parents. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me. And yeah, LinkedIn and my website is where you can get in contact with me if you want to work one to one, or if you want to go through some workshops first just to get a taste. You can find me there.
Fantastic. I love that. I haven't researched obviously heavily to find out who's helping parents of preteens, but this sounds like something that's not prevalent out there. So I'm glad this is something you jumped onto because obviously every next generation is going to take their own shape and form, but parenting is so important. And
Yeah.
it's a gift. It's a gift to be a parent and to be able to invest in that child.
You know that people say there's no book for parenting, and there are. I'll just give a pushback right down. There
Yeah,
are books.
sure. There's a lot
There
of
are
books out.
thousands.
Yeah.
There are thousands of books. You don't have time to read them. You don't have the attention to read them. I love this stuff. Human development is what I do love. That
Yeah.
said, the greatest book on parenting you're ever going to read is the one that you write,
Mm,
and I wanna help collaborate writing it with you. Yeah.
absolutely. I love that. Well, Marcus, it's been great talking to you today. We finish every episode with the same question. What is something our listeners can do intentionally today to be a better leader?
Be intentional on establishing your identity. with the phrase "I am." After you say "I am" and you fill in that with an empowering phrase of the type of leader you want to be, say "because," and you reaffirm it with a reason. I am this type of leader because blah, 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 blah. And then you go live it.
I love that. The because is huge. We have to know the why.
And it's self-directed based on your value system. So you get to own it.
Yeah, fantastic. Listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this with Marcus today. You'll find in the show notes all the links to his website and the LinkedIn and everything else. I hope you take advantage of going out and working with him. If you've got that preteen, or even if you're a few years away from that preteen, he could be a great resource for you. Marcus, I appreciate you. It's great to build this relationship with you, and I pray that God blesses your work to impact the future through parents.
Sean, thank you for this time, for this conversation. It's been wonderful.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast.